Picture this: I stood frozen, my boots sinking into the dusty earth of my family's ranch, as yellow bulldozers crept toward my barn like predators stalking prey. Their engines growled with menace, carrying the bitter sting of betrayal, lies, and greed. 3 men in crisp, dark suits, government IDs, dangling like badges of arrogance, stood smirking behind the machines. They pointed at my land, my home, as if it was theirs to claim. One barked orders into a walkie-talkie, while the other 2 shared a smug high five, acting like tearing down my legacy was just another Tuesday. The ringleader, Steve, spun toward me, his voice cutting through the air. "You're trespassing on public land. Vacate now, or we start demolition." Trespassing on my own ranch. This land had been ours for generations, paid for in sweat and blood, long before their cookie-cutter suburbs sprouted up. I clutched the original deed, its edges yellowed and brittle, a testament to our history. But the HOA had spun a vicious lie, convincing the county my ranch was abandoned public land. Now, these men were here to erase it all. My heart pounded, but I didn't waver. I reached into my back pocket, pulled out my phone, and pressed the red button I'd been saving for weeks. A sharp buzz pierced the air. Steve froze, his smug grin faltering. Then, a roar thundered, not from the bulldozers, but from the sky. A sleek black helicopter swooped low, its blades whipping up a storm that sent Steve's clipboard flying. SUVs screeched in from the back road, spilling out men in black uniforms, badges glinting with authority. One pointed directly at Steve, and the real fight began. Which city in the United States are you watching from? Drop a comment and share with us if you've had any confrontation with an HOA. Will narrate your story on our channel. Steve N said, "Step away from the property, you're under federal investigation." Steve's mouth fell open. The HOA president, Sharon, who had been hiding in her car nearby, jumped out screaming, "What is going on? This was supposed to be easy." I turned around slowly, face calm, and said, "You shouldn't have forged federal documents." And that's when she did something no one expected. She pulled out her phone and called 911 on me, but it was too late. Everything was already in motion. Now, let me take you back to where this story really began, because things didn't start with helicopters and fraud. No, it started with muffins. Yeah, blueberry muffins that morning. 3 months ago, I had walked into town with a box of them, fresh from my oven, still warm. I'd bake them for the new neighbors moving in down the road. I figured kindness still mattered in this world. I'd always been that way, friendly, helpful, quiet. The ranch was about 40 acres, nestled between some rolling hills and a dusty old main road. It wasn't flashy, but it was home. My parents had raised horses here. My granddad grew pecans. I just tried to keep it all from falling apart after they passed. So when the new neighbors came in, James and his wife Nicole, I welcomed them the good, old-fashioned way. "Morning," I said, offering the muffins names. "Henry, I run the place." Down the road they looked surprised, not at the muffins, but at me, like they didn't expect a real person to live on that land. Nicole took a muffin, smiled politely but didn't bite. James just stared at me like I was an insect. "Oh right, that land over there," he said. "We heard it was like county-owned or something, abandoned." I laughed. Abandoned? Been in my family since 1923. They didn't laugh back. Fast forward 2 weeks later, and I got my first letter from the HOA. It said, "Dear occupant, you are in violation of HOA Regulation 7B. unauthorized structures on community land. I crumpled it and tossed it in the fireplace. Must have been a mistake, I thought. But then came the second letter, and the third, and finally, a final warning with a printed eviction date. I drove down to the HOA office the next morning, stormed through the glass doors, and asked to speak to someone in charge. That's when I met Sharon, mid-50s, tight bun, high heels, a thick folder of rules in one hand, and iced coffee in the other. I believe there's been a misunderstanding, I said. That ranch, it's mine, deed. I've got the documents. She didn't look at them. She just smirked and said, well, the system doesn't show your name on the plot anymore. That land was recently transferred. Transferred to who? She flipped a page in her folder. The HOA. I nearly choked. You're telling me the HOA stole my land? Her eyes narrowed. I'm telling you, Mr. Collins, that if you don't remove your structures in 30 days, we will. That night, I called my friend Ava. She was a real estate lawyer in the city, sharp as a tack and stubborn as a bull. Something's wrong, she said, after going through my paperwork. Your deed's real, but someone filed a counter deed claiming the land reverted to the state after a tax error 5 years ago. But I paid the taxes, I said. She nodded. I know, I saw your receipts. Someone's lying, and they've gone deep. That's when we started digging. Late nights, long phone calls, research trips to county records. Every document we pulled led to more confusion. It looked like the land had been listed as inactive because of a clerical glitch, but the HOA had pounced on it like wolves. They filed a false claim, used forged signatures, and bought it for $1 at a closed-door meeting with a corrupt official. Ava said, this isn't just a land grab, it's fraud, and if we expose it, it'll blow up their whole operation. I felt sick, but I also felt something else: fire. They weren't just messing with my land, they were messing with my family's name. So I stopped being polite. I got a surveyor, filed a quiet title action, tipped off the media, sent anonymous complaints to state agencies. Ava worked her network, getting federal investigators to sniff around, but the HOA caught wind. They started sending trucks past my home every night. They set up orange flags in my pasture. Then I came home one evening and found a notice nailed to my barn door. It read, this structure will be removed by county order. You're advised to vacate. I called the number listed. The woman on the other end said it was official, that my appeal had been rejected, but I never filed one. They were burying my evidence. I knew then I needed to go bigger, so I called in the favor of a friend, someone who worked with the Department of Interior, someone who owed me from a time I'd helped save his brother's farm years ago. I need eyes on this, I said. I think this HOA is laundering land through fake filings. He got me a meeting with a regional investigator. And that meeting changed everything. They opened a quiet probe, and as the HOA prepared their demolition day, thinking I was alone and defenseless, I was building my own trap, the kind that doesn't just stop a lie, it exposes it. So when that helicopter landed and the federal agents walked out with badges and Sharon panicked and dialed 911, that was just the beginning. Because the next thing that happened, no one could believe, not even me. Where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. And remember, don't ever underestimate someone just because they're quiet. The sirens screamed down the dusty road. Within minutes, red and blue lights flashed through the early morning haze as the sheriff's deputies pulled up tires, grinding on gravel. Sharon, the HOA president, was standing in the middle of the ranch's entrance, waving her phone like it was a badge of power. There he is, she yelled, pointing at me. He's threatening us. He's got strangers on the property. armed men and helicopters. He's dangerous. Steve, the slick HOA lawyer, stood behind her, sweat soaking his collar, trying to disappear into the crowd. The sheriff stepped out, tall and broad, sunglasses on hand, resting casually near his belt. I recognized him immediately, Sheriff Tom Duggan. We weren't close, but he knew me, knew my dad, knew the ranch. We weren't friends, but we weren't enemies either, just men who nodded when they passed each other at the feed store. "Morning, Henry," he said flatly. "Morning, Sheriff," I replied, calm as ever. "Would you like to see my deed before you arrest me?" He raised an eyebrow there, saying, "You brought in feds." "I didn't bring anyone, Tom. They came on their own just then." Agent Ramirez, one of the federal investigators, stepped forward and flashed his badge. "Sheriff Duggan, I'm with the Office of Inspector General. We've been conducting a quiet investigation into fraudulent land acquisitions in this county. Mr. Collins is cooperating with us." The sheriff blinked. His eyes darted to Sharon, who suddenly went quiet. "And these folks?" he asked, nodding at the HOA crew. Ramirez didn't hesitate. "We have reason to believe they submitted forged documents to the county registrar. We're taking over from here, but you might want to keep them on site for questioning." That's when Sharon snapped. "This is a mistake." She shouted that land was abandoned. "We followed the law. You can't just barge in and take over." Steve finally stepped forward, his voice shaking. "You're making a big deal over paperwork. We were just trying to help the community. That ranch is an eyesore." I almost laughed. "You think my great-grandfather's house is an eyesore?" I said. No one responded, and then, as if it couldn't get any worse for them, a black SUV pulled up quietly behind the cop cars. A woman in a gray pantsuit stepped out, holding a brown file folder. She walked straight up to Sharon, pulled a document from the folder, and said, "Sharon Marks, you are hereby served a subpoena from the Federal Land Commission." The silence was deafening. Even the birds stopped chirping. I looked around at the chaos, the confusion, the stunned faces, and I felt something rare relief. But before I could breathe easy, a low voice spoke behind me. "You think this is over?" It was James, the neighbor, who first mentioned the land being abandoned. His arms were crossed, face twisted into a fake smile. "You've made a lot of noise, Henry," he said, "but this isn't the kind of place where the truth matters. People listen to power, and we've got plenty of it." I stepped forward slowly, eyes locked on his. "Then you'd better start using it to hire a lawyer," I said, because Ava had already filed a formal civil suit that morning, one that named James, Nicole, Sharon, and Steve as co-conspirators in a scheme to defraud a private landowner. But before we get too far ahead, let me take you back to when the HOA first started targeting me. Before the threats, before the fake documents, before James and Nicole even moved in, the problems really began the day the county announced the new development project. They wanted to build a luxury golf resort right next to my ranch. At first, I didn't care. I wasn't selling, wasn't moving. I liked my quiet life, my chickens, my horses, my routine. I figured, let them build their little golf playground. Didn't affect me, or so I thought. A week after the announcement, I started getting offers, big money. Slick realtors with fancy watches offering life-changing deals for my land. I told them all no, and that's when the pressure started. Strange people parked outside my fence line. Drones flew overhead at night. My mailbox was smashed 3 times in 1 month, and then one morning, I found a dead rooster laid out perfectly at the edge of my driveway. No tracks, no blood, just the rooster, like a warning. I didn't say anything. I just buried it behind the barn and kept my mouth shut. But Ava noticed. She came to visit one weekend and said, "You know this isn't normal, right? They're trying to scare you." "I'm not scared," I told her. "I'm angry." She looked at me long and hard, then nodded. "Good, let's use that." So we got to work. She helped me catalog every strange event, every letter, every interaction. She took pictures, made recordings, backed up files. And then we dug into the HOA itself. What we found made my skin crawl. The HOA had a long history of shady land acquisitions. They'd convinced old folks to sell for pennies, pressured struggling families into signing community transfer agreements. Without legal advice, some of the names on their board had connections to developers. Others were investors themselves. It wasn't a neighborhood committee. It was a business one that profited off lies and manipulation. That's when I knew if I didn't fight back, I wouldn't just lose the ranch. I'd lose everything my family built. But knowing the truth and proving it are two different things. That's why we reached out to federal authorities. Quietly, carefully, and they started watching for weeks. The Fed set up hidden cameras, planted an undercover agent in one of the HOA board meetings. They traced bank transfers, pulled surveillance footage from gas stations. They even hacked into the HOA's private server and found emails, ugly ones emails, where Sharon openly discussed how to shift land zoning status and create a paper trail that works in our favor. One of the emails had my name in the subject line. That's when the agents went silent, radio silence, for a full week. No updates, no messages. I thought the plan had failed. I thought I'd lost until the helicopter showed up. And now, with the sirens still fading in the background and half the HOA being questioned behind my barn, James had the nerve to threaten me, and I knew it then. This wasn't just about my land. This was war. But just as I was about to respond, we heard a loud crack in the distance, like a gunshot. Everyone froze. Sheriff Duggan spun around. "Did you hear that?" Another crack, louder this time. Then smoke began to rise. From the south field. It was my barn. Someone had set it on fire. "Get back," the sheriff shouted as people began to scatter. I ran toward the flames, heart racing, boots pounding the dirt. I didn't care about the suits or the subpoenas or the politics anymore. That barn held every photo, every memory, every piece of my family's past, and now it was burning. The flames danced like demons in the morning light. My legs were moving before I even realized it, sprinting toward the south field, where the barn, my family's barn, stood ablaze. The smoke was thick and black, curling into the sky like a signal flare of destruction. My lungs burned with every breath. But I didn't stop. Inside that barn were the things that mattered most: the saddle my grandfather carved by hand, the ledger books my mom kept when she ran the farm, old photos, heirlooms, tools from the 1920s, memories. I could already hear the roof groaning under the heat. "Henry, get back," someone shouted behind me, but I didn't listen. I yanked the barn door open, heat slapping me in the face like a hammer. Smoke rushed out, choking and furious. I staggered back, coughing, eyes watering. There was no way in. The fire was too far gone. Suddenly, strong arms grabbed me and pulled me back. Sheriff Duggan and one of the federal agents. "Don't be stupid, Collins," the sheriff barked. "You'll die in there." I struggled, trying to break free. "There's stuff in there. My whole family's." "I know," he said, "but you're still alive. Don't give them everything." That's when I realized this wasn't random. This was arson, and someone was trying to erase my legacy. I turned around, heart hammering in my chest, and looked across the property. James was gone, Nicole too. Steve was still being questioned by Ramirez, but Sharon was nowhere in sight. "They're trying to destroy the evidence," Ava said, quietly stepping beside me. Her voice trembled, but not with fear, with fury. "They think if they burn it all down, they win." The fire truck finally arrived, but by the time the flames were under control, the barn was a black skeleton of ash and smoke. I stood there for a long time, staring at the wreckage, my hands clenched into fists. The ranch was under federal protection. Now the land grab was exposed. But the fire proved this fight wasn't over. That night, I sat alone on the porch, a wool blanket over my shoulders, watching the embers glow in the distance like angry stars. Ava joined me, handing me a warm cup of coffee. "You think it was James?" I asked. She nodded. "Or someone working for him. We'll find out." "How?" She gave a tight smile. "Because I installed a motion-triggered trail cam last week, right by the Southfield gate." "I sat up. What I didn't tell you," she said, "because I didn't want to get your hopes up. But I figured if they were crazy enough to lie to the government, they might try something desperate." We rushed inside to her laptop. She popped in the memory card and opened the footage. At first it was nothing but grainy shots of squirrels and the occasional bird. Then around 4:23 a.m. that morning, headlights. A man in a hoodie stepped out, tall, slim build, walked straight to the barn with a gas can in one hand and a rag in the other. He lit it and disappeared. The camera caught a glimpse of his face when he turned toward the flame. It was James, clear as day. Ava sat back. "That's enough for attempted arson and destruction of federal property." I leaned forward, face numb. "He's not going to get away with this. We need to get this to the feds," she said, "right now." But just as we were packing up the files, a rock slammed through the kitchen. Window glass shattered across the floor. I dropped to a crouch, instinct kicking in. We rushed outside, flashlights in hand. Another rock hit the porch, railing followed by footsteps, sprinting into the darkness. Whoever it was, they didn't want to be seen. "They're trying to scare you again," Ava whispered, but I wasn't scared. I was done being scared. The next morning, we sent the footage to Agent Ramirez. By noon, an arrest warrant for James was issued that afternoon. Nicole posted bail for him, and the news spread like wildfire across town. People were starting to whisper, the HOA, once so confident. I noticed something strange. Every single utility pole leading to my ranch had been spray painted with red X marks. I stopped the truck, stepped out and stared at them. Not just one, not two, all of them. That's when I saw the sign posted at the town entrance: upcoming development, county approved evacuation and demolition. They were trying to wipe me off the map, legally, physically, completely. I called Ava, heart pounding. "We've got a bigger problem," I said. Because now it wasn't just the HOA, it was someone in the county office too, and we had no idea how high this thing went. But before I could even tell her everything, I saw my truck engine sputtered, died, lights went out, battery completely drained. I tried the ignition again, nothing. That's when I heard footsteps in the woods behind me, slow crunching leaves getting closer. I reached under my seat for the flashlight, but before I could grab it, something knocked on the driver's window. A hand, just one hand. Then a voice whispered through the glass, "You've made some powerful enemies, Henry, and they're not finished yet." I froze. The hand on the glass didn't move. The voice had been soft, calm, even, but laced with something darker, a threat wrapped in velvet. I couldn't see his face in the shadows, but I didn't need to. Whoever he was, he wasn't a random local. He knew my name, and he was sent. I quickly grabbed the flashlight, flicked it on, and swung it toward the window. The man was already gone just like that. I burst out of the truck, light darting across the dark woods. Nothing, just rustling trees and the faint chirp of crickets. Whoever it was had vanished like smoke. I slammed the truck door shut and tried the engine again, still dead. So I locked it, grabbed my phone, and started walking back toward the main road. My boots crunched against the gravel. The night air was heavy, every shadow. Now a suspect, I called. Ava, no answer. Tried again, still nothing. Something was wrong. When I finally made it to the gas station near town, I saw her car parked out front, but the lights inside the station were off, doors locked, the attendant gone. It was eerie then. My phone vibrated, blocked number. I hesitated, answered. "You're making this bigger than it needs to be," the voice said. "You'll get someone hurt, maybe." Her. My throat tightened. "What did you do?" "Turn around." I spun on my heel, and there she was, Ava, walking up the road toward me, stumbling, slightly holding her side. I rushed to her. "Ava." She waved me off. "I'm fine," she said, though her lip was bleeding. Someone grabbed me outside the diner, shoved me into an alley, warned me to drop the lawsuit. I helped her sit on the curb, rage burning through my chest. "Did they take your phone?" I asked. She nodded. "Yeah, but I got a good look at him. It wasn't James. It was someone new, someone serious. He had a badge, a real one, a badge." Now I knew this wasn't just the HOA anymore. This was tied to the county government, to the development company, to people who had money riding on bulldozing my land. "Come on," I said. "We're not going to the cops this time. They've already been bought." "Then what do we do?" I looked her in the eye. "We take it public." The next morning, Ava posted a video, a long one. She laid out every detail. How the HOA lied, how the county let it happen, how they tried to erase me, burn the barn, and now physically threaten us. She didn't hold back. She showed the photos, the emails, the footage from the barn arson, even the voice message from the unknown caller. We uploaded it everywhere: Facebook, Reddit, Twitter, YouTube. Within hours, it went viral. Local news stations started calling national ones. Followed by noon, 3 news vans were parked outside the ranch. A drone flew overhead. The same ranch they once tried to call abandoned was now all over TV. That's when the call started. Neighbors who had once ignored me now called in tears. "I'm so sorry," one woman said. "I had no idea they were doing this to you. I got tricked into signing something too." Another man confessed. "They said it was just for community improvement, but now I'm being sued for blocking a walking trail." More and more people started coming forward. The town was waking up, but that afternoon something else happened, something worse. The development company's lawyer filed an emergency injunction against me. They were accusing me of defamation, trying to silence me. Legally, they claimed the video had irreparably harmed their business reputation, and that I was spreading unfounded conspiracy theories. The courthouse scheduled a hearing in 72 hours. If they won, I could lose everything: my land, my name, even my freedom. I looked at Ava. "Can they really do this?" She shrugged. "They can try, but they're bluffing. They're scared." That video worked, but fear still hung in the air like smoke. I stayed up that night, watching the burnt remains of the barn from my porch. My grandfather's tools were gone, my mother's photo albums gone, but what they hadn't taken, what they couldn't take, was my fight still. I couldn't shake the feeling that this was far from over, and I was right at sunrise. I got a knock on my door. I opened it slowly. It was Sheriff Duggan. His face was tight, serious. "We've got a problem," he said. He stepped aside. Behind him, stood 3 men in suits. "Not feds, not local, state level, Mr. Collins," one said. "We're here on behalf of the State Land Development Authority, effective immediately. Your ranch is now part of an emergency acquisition project for public infrastructure. We have the order right here." He handed me a letter with the state seal stamped at the top. I read it once, then again, and I felt my knees go weak. They were trying to seize my ranch by force, under the claim of eminent domain. Just like that, my name wasn't even on the top line. They had already filed it days ago. The ink was dry, the signatures forged, and the order approved it. Was a setup. I looked up at the man and said only 2 words: "This war." I stood there, holding the official state document, my fingers trembling not from fear but from the sheer weight of rage building in my chest. "Sheriff." Duggan glanced at me, unsure of where to stand. He didn't speak, but his eyes said it all. They're pulling strings way above our heads. The lead state official, a man named Brent Holloway, stepped forward. "This isn't personal, Mr. Collins," he said in a voice that felt like gravel and arrogance. "It's business. The land you're sitting on is vital to a new bypass project. Staff funded, federally approved." I shot back. "And let me guess, you found out it was available from your good friends at the HOA, who lied and burned my barn to the ground." Brent didn't blink. "The paperwork checks out because you forged it," Ava said, suddenly appearing behind me, phone in hand, recording everything. Brent didn't like that, not one bit. He turned to Duggan. "We're enforcing the order whether he agrees or not." The sheriff shifted. "Brent, you're pushing too fast. That lands under federal review right now. I have override authority under state emergency zoning." I took a step forward. "If you step 1 foot past that fence without a court hearing, I'll sue this entire county down to its boots." He smirked. "I hope you have a good lawyer." And just like that, they left, dropping that dirty little bomb in my lap and walking away. Like they'd won, but they hadn't, not yet, because what they didn't know was that Ava and I had recorded every single word, that declaration, that threat, that blatant abuse of power. It was now in the public domain within 2 hours. It was viral again. This time, people didn't just share the video, they marched by afternoon. Over 100 residents stood outside my ranch, gate signs in hand, cameras rolling. "Protect family land, stop the land theft. This is America, not a Monopoly game." People who once avoided me now brought casseroles. Teenagers made TikToks calling out. The HOA, a local radio host, even parked a van on the edge of my property, broadcasting live updates. The development company was furious. The HOA board tried to resign quietly. Too late. Their names were already exposed. James and Nicole, their house, got vandalized that night, not by me, but by angry neighbors who realized they were pawns in a bigger game. But just as I started to breathe again, I got an email, no subject, just a link. I clicked it. It was a private Dropbox folder containing dozens of scanned documents, original land surveys, old signatures, notarized letters, county transfer slips, and at the center of it, a recorded phone call between Sharon and Brent. "Sharon, it doesn't matter what's legal. Once the state claims it, Collins can't touch us, Brent. Just make sure the paperwork's clean enough to look passable. The governor's office doesn't ask questions if the land clears fast." My jaw clenched. They weren't just crooked, they were coordinated. I turned to Ava. "Where did this come from?" She shook her head. "I didn't send it." Moments later, a new message popped up. "If you want more, meet me midnight at the old grain mill. No name, No number, no joke. Ava frowned. It could be a trap, or it could be the key to bringing them down, I said. We didn't tell anyone, not even the sheriff. We left late that night, Ava driving while I sat with my old revolver hidden in my jacket. The grain mill was about 6 miles out, abandoned for years. A perfect place to disappear someone when we arrived. The air was thick with silence. The moonlight spilled through the broken roof beams. As we stepped inside, boots echoing on the cracked concrete, then we saw him, an old man, hunched over, sitting on a wooden crate. Name's Walter, he said, pulling off his cap. Used to be county clerk. He looked tired, guilty. I'm the one who filed the fake transfer, he admitted, backdated. It adjusted the digital logs. They paid me to do it. I kept my mouth shut for years, but now they're coming after you, burning barns, hurting women. No, that's where I draw the line. He handed me a USB drive. It's all on there. Every deal, every payment, every bribe. Ava's hands shook as she took it. But if they find out, I talked, Walter whispered. I'm as good as dead. I nodded. You did the right thing. I hope so, he said, fading into the darkness. Back at the ranch, we didn't sleep. We spent all night uploading the files, backing them up, encrypting them. By dawn, the drive had been duplicated and sent to 6 different news outlets and 1 federal agency. The evidence was live. I thought it was over, but I was wrong, because just after sunrise, a sheriff's deputy banged on my door. Henry, he said out of breath, you need to come with me. Why? There's been an explosion. Where? He looked down the county courthouse. The words barely sank. In explosion, county courthouse. I stared at Deputy Miller, who was still catching his breath. His squad car sat running behind him, lights spinning, dust curling up from the gravel road like smoke signals. What happened? I asked, voice dry as chalk. They don't know yet, he said, glancing over his shoulder. But the building's gone, Henry gone, bomb squads on site, news trucks are circling like vultures. I didn't waste another second. Ava and I jumped into her car and followed him down the winding road into town. The closer we got, the thicker the chaos became. Sirens, helicopters, smoke rising like a black curtain over Main Street. When we finally reached the courthouse square, my stomach twisted. What used to be a red brick county courthouse, 2 stories tall, with white columns and a carved stone seal, was now a collapsed pile of concrete ash and twisted metal. Emergency crews had set up barricades. Firefighters dragged out charred beams. Journalists shoved microphones at anyone in uniform. And through the madness I saw Brent Holloway, covered in soot, a gash on his forehead, being led to an ambulance. I didn't know whether to be relieved or suspicious. Ava leaned in. He's still alive. Yeah, I muttered. But someone wanted the records gone. That wasn't just about sending a message, that was about erasing the evidence. As if hearing me, Agent Ramirez suddenly appeared through the crowd and pulled us aside. We just lost every physical document tied to the HOA development project, he said, voice tight with rage. But someone tipped me off about your USB drop last night. I've got a copy. I handed him Walter's full data archive. Here's the original, time-stamped, the recordings, the bribes, every land transfer. He took it like it was a bomb in itself. We'll fast-track this through the DOJ, he said. But Henry, listen carefully. This wasn't just a desperate move. This was an inside job. Someone wanted to bury the paper trail before we could make arrests. Ava stepped forward. Do you think it was James Ramirez? Shook his head. No, he's still in holding. He had nothing to do with this. I looked at Ava then, who we didn't get an answer. But that evening we got another message. It was taped to the side of our chicken coop. No envelope. just duct-taped to the wood, big, thick, black marker letters. It doesn't end here. Sell now, or watch what comes next. No signature, no name, but I knew someone still wanted that land, and they were willing to burn the whole county to the ground to get it. Ava called. Ramirez, we need protection. You've got it, he said, to marshals on site within the hour. Don't leave the property for the first time in my life. My ranch became a military outpost. Federal agents slept in my guest house. Motion sensors were installed along every fence trail. Cams, real ones, flashed all night, but it didn't stop the next move, because just as the media began broadcasting our evidence nationwide, a new lawsuit arrived, not from the HOA, not from the county, but from a foreign-owned development firm based in Florida, Sunset Properties International. They claimed they had purchased development rights to the land 2 months ago through a shadow corporation tied to the original HOA board. According to their lawsuit, they were now the rightful owners of the entire south end of my ranch, where my destroyed barn still lay in ashes. That's not possible, Ava said, flipping through the documents. They're trying to confuse the courts. I said, flood the system with conflicting claims until a judge orders me off the property just to settle it. And worst of all, it might work, because we discovered that one of the judges set to hear our case had financial ties to the very same firm. They're rigging the game from every angle. Ava whispered, I know, but then our luck turned. Walter, the former clerk, who had given us the USB, sent a message. I found something else. The master file. The one that connects everything. The judge. The HOA Sunset Properties. But I can't email it to Risky. Meet me at the old chapel on Millstone Road. Bring no one. It sounded like a trap, but we had no choice. The next morning, before dawn, Ava and I drove down Millstone Road, old cracked asphalt, cutting through the woods like a forgotten scar. The chapel was crumbling stone walls, covered in ivy. The wooden cross on the steeple long gone. We stepped inside. The air was cold, dusty, quiet. Walter. I called, no answer. We waited 5 minutes, 10. Then we heard it, a soft creak from the back. Walter appeared. Older than before, his shirt stained with sweat, eyes darting like a hunted man. He handed us a folder, thick, stuffed with printouts. Maps, photos, financial records. This is the blueprint. He whispered, a 20-year scheme to flip federal grants into private land grabs, hundreds of properties across the state. Yours was just the last domino. My fingers trembled as I opened it. Everything was there. Emails from judges, bribes from Sunset, development blueprints with names, dates, payment, transfers, even internal memos from Brent's office. They're laundering federal dollars through fake infrastructure projects, Ava said, stunned. They're trying to turn half the state into a resort, Walter added, with HOA board members as shareholders. We had it, everything but. As we turned to leave, a shot rang out the chapel window, exploded. Get down, I yelled, dragging Ava to the floor. Walter fell back with a cry. His leg hit. Gunfire erupted outside. Someone was trying to silence him. We dragged Walter behind the pulpit and called Ramirez. Amstone Chapel. Shots fired. Stay down. Backup is 2 minutes out. But we didn't have 2 minutes, because the next voice we heard was outside the chapel, distorted through a megaphone. Henry Collins. You come out now, or we burn the whole place to the ground. Ava's eyes widened. Is that Brent? I crawled to the window, heart pounding. It was Brent Holloway, face blackened from the courthouse explosion, holding a and a match. Time slowed. Brent stood outside the crumbling chapel, wild-eyed, ash still clinging to his cheeks from the courthouse blast, he looked less like a state official and more like a man unraveling at the seams. He held the flamethrower like it was just another tool in his belt, but the match in his other hand trembled. "I gave you every chance, Henry," he roared, "but you had to play hero. You had to run your mouth, post your